Welcome back to another episode of the Tennis Doctors, where three physicians discuss the world of men's professional tennis. I'm Dr. Jay Sridhar. Joining me as always, first Dr. Bilal Ahmed
Hey, good to be back.
and Dr. Arjun Awat.
Hello, everyone.
So we're recording this Tuesday before the Open. It's August 23rd, 2022. So we're going to come back with the draw preview comes out, but we just want to take a minute, recap what happened the last couple weeks and look ahead. So quick recap, we're post Wimbledon. There's a bunch of little tournaments, we had a couple of clay tournaments. We had Hamburg, we had Umag, we had Los Cabos, and then you get into the thick of things with Washington, Canada Masters, Winston-Salem ongoing right now. So my big thing, Bilal, my question is, and we can go through all the different winners. You look at the time period post Wimbledon. We have a lot of thoughts post Wimbledon about certain people. Who do you kind of view as the biggest winners and losers? You thought made a step forward, you think in that time, and people who are a little disappointed in their progress in the last 5-6 weeks?
I think one of the biggest winners who sticks out to me is actually Stefano Tsitsipas, not because he did anything particularly impressive. He made the finals of Cincinnati and lost in a match he arguably an opponent he actually has not done that well against. Of course, this guy was given trouble in the past, but Tsitsipas kind of needed to make a statement. I don't think his season has been ultra impressive. We look back on 2022 overall for him. But I felt like the win against Medvedev, especially on the hard courts, is a good for his confidence. I think that should bode well for him going to U.S. Open, where he's never made it past even the third round. So, happy for him to see some progress after a difficult few months and see how he does going forward. I thought Borna Coric, obviously, just reflect on Cincinnati right now, maybe recency bias. Good win for him after a tough time with injuries and being able to come back in a really difficult draw. If you look at it, his draw was not very straightforward, and he really capitalized and own the moment. So good for him as well. I feel like Yannick Sinner had a really impressive win over Alcaraz at Umag, and that was a statement for him as well. Really not had an overall super impressive year, but starting to make small advances. So those are three guys who just stick out to me immediately, just off the bat.
Arjun, are you the same three guys on your list?
One of them. I echo with Tsitsipas and agree with the other two that you mentioned as well. In addition to Tsitsipas, I'll talk about him for a second. His pedigree, I think he's really been kind of peaking throughout his career. This year is definitely he's at his best playing form. But I guess on the contradictory, he needs to really capitalize on all these wins that he's having this year. I think and make a statement win at the U.S. Open with the championship. I was really impressed with Fritz. He had, defeated Kyrgios and Rublev in Cincinnati. He beat Murray and Tiafoe in Canada. All those players have been playing exceptionally well. And as I just mentioned, I think tennis is a lot about peaking at the right time. I feel like Fritz has been capitalizing on small wins and getting big wins, even after Wimbledon. And advancing through the hardcourt season, improving throughout. He had 1 win in Washington, 2 in Canada, 3 in Cincinnati, and I think in New York, I can see him making 4 or 5 wins deep in the tournament again. My third guy that I was impressed with, Cam Norrie. I think a lot of people, after making a Cinderella run, they can drop off the map. Cam Norrie, he's been winning matches that he's supposed to win. He went pretty deep in Cabos, lost to Medvedev. That's not a surprise, given his level compared to Medvedev's. But he did beat FAA. He lost to him right back in Canada. But in Cincinnati, he also beat Rune, Murray, Shelton, winning against another Cinderella story. And then Alcaraz against in 3 tight sets. So I think that's a big statement win for beating Alcaraz. So yeah, those three, Tsitsipas, Fritz, and Cam Norrie are my 3 people I was most impressed with.
I have some thoughts on those, and maybe I'll throw them in when we get to rankings and kind of looking forward to the U.S. Open. Who were you disappointed by, Bilal? And
Yeah, I do have to correct myself on one more thing too. I gotta say Nick Kyrgios, actually. I gotta sub him in. Winning Washington in an impressive manner after Wimbledon. I feel like a lot of people can kind of fall off, and particularly him. And it's sort of like a slump. And I feel like his ability to win there and also beat Medvedev in the summer season was pretty impressive on the hard court. So just gotta throw him as well into the mix. But most disappointing was, speaking of Medvedev, I feel like this Cincinnati tournament was kind of a bummer. I mean, he really had an opportunity to actually win that match. I think against Cincinnati, I think his serve let him down quite a bit. Was serving kind of awful. Didn't really have a lot going from that day, which is a strength for him usually. Other guys, Alcaraz, I'm still kind of. I'm not saying I'm off the boat right now, but I'm just kind of wondering: has the hype gone to him? Is his maturity there? Is he able to really learn from the past of the last few 6 months to show more growth? I don't know if I've seen a lot of growth in his game and his execution in moments where he really should be winning if he wants to prove himself to be that next big level threat. So two guys who stick out to me, who I know we're going to talk about power rankings here in a bit, but I don't know where they stand in my rankings right now. I think both those guys have made me a little disappointed in the last 2 to 3 tournaments.
Can I make a
Yeah.
not to not to break the rules of my own game? I'm gonna say I haven't really been impressed by anybody.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way. I think there's Mike, but I think we're kind of in a weird vacuum period. I mean, PCB and Borna Coric winning the Masters kind of tell weird sort of time, right? Zverev's out indefinitely. Medvedev missed big chunks of the year, had hernia surgery this year. Tsitsipas had elbow surgery this year, changed his racket. Djokovic can't play more than half these events. Nadal is not playing, whether it's out actual injury or preservation, most of these events. And then it seems like the next group is just too young, right? Like it's like Sinner, Alcaraz, FAA, get there maybe, but they're just not quite ready. And so a little bit of a vacuum right now. And I'm older than you guys. I think of it a little bit as like the early 2000s when pre-Federer, kind of when Empress were fading out a little bit. It was kind of like this, where if you look at the Masters winners, kind of random, right? And none of these guys. I guess for me, I think the big winner are the big three and Murray, because I really gives you appreciation for how far above the field they were. It's not that easy to be that good. It's not that easy to consistently make the semis and finals of event and be expected to and always be the favorite. And it's like very clear to anyone, even casual tennis fans, that they're better than the other guy, because we talked about this before. One of you said this, it's kind of a mush once you get into the 5 to 25 range. Like any of these guys could be any of the other ones any day, right? And so like I laugh every time you say Taylor Fritz, because I don't view him as a real contender because of his movement, but Taylor Fritz can certainly beat any of these guys the way they're right now. So I'm going to give my winner stamp to a guy who I think he's going to be back, as Dominic Thiem. I think he's been making strides in the clay. He just came back to the hard courts this weekend with his own first hard court match in 18 months, won in the third set for JJ Wolf, hit 2 massive winners. Like it's clearly not all there if he's struggling with guys who are ranked in the 50 to 100 range. But I do think he's going to get back. I think I've seen enough that unless he gets hurt again, I think he's going to be back. And then Borna Coric is the other. I think again it kind of came out of nowhere where he wins this tournament, but he was a legit top 15 to top 20 player at a very young age who got hurt. He had back injuries and he had surgery. And you got to give props. Having shoulder surgery as a tennis player on your serving shoulder is like the death of many careers. There's many quote unquote washed up pro prospects who had shoulder surgery and that was it. They were done. Mm-hmm. And to make it back and win a Masters, and it really wasn't fluky. He didn't drop a set except for the Nadal match. He was pretty on point. He beat all these other guys in straights. I think you got to tip your hat. And I like those stories. I view them as guys who could days in the top 15 to 20 in a short amount of time. And it's partly because the top 20 to 15 to 20 is kind of mushy right now. We didn't even mention Berrettini. Berrettini's been out. He got hurt and then he got COVID. And it's like, there really hasn't been much consistency in terms of who's available. It's going to the next subject, Arjun. Like, so we talked before, we kind of looked at the US Open. We're like, okay, Nadal and Medvedev. If Djokovic isn't playing, it's Nadal and Medvedev, right? Yeah. Like, and then it's everyone's. Who, if you had to pick somebody, if you're like, okay, I can't pick Nadal and Medvedev to win the title. Here are my next 3 guys in order. Who do you have 3, 4, 5?
Yeah, I actually did my U.S. Open power rankings without those two in it purposefully. But yeah, I have Tsitsipas, Hercox, Fritz, Nori, and Berrettini in it.
In that order?
Um, yeah, I think right now in that order.
Interesting.
But what it really comes down to, you were just saying, it's a spider web of players, one winning against the other, who's beating the other. Like FAA can beat anyone, then Fritz can beat anyone, then they can lose to each other, and it's kind of like who's getting.
I'm gonna laugh every time you say Taylor Fritz. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I can't help myself.
Keep laughing. Watch him get to the semis again. But yeah, no, it's really.
He didn't get to the semis. He lost in the quarters.
Oh, he lost in the quarters. Okay, this time he's getting to the semis. Yeah, it's really who's mentally tough in these moments, in the semis, in the finals, in the quarters, even the round of 32 when they're supposed to beat a player who they're supposed to beat in 2 or 3 sets. And none of these guys have really been consistent in winning. And like you mentioned, it's kind of like a black hole. There's no real dominant force right now. Even Medvedev, he's not the most dominant force right now. He's probably the most talented player on tour, him and Tsitsipas combined. But you could argue that the other players in the crowd have just as much or more fight within them that those top 2 players have. In my power rankings, I see Hercox having good wins against Kyrgios and Ruud. He had a respectable loss to PCB in the finals of Canada. And a close, Isner is not a real player, to be honest. He's 37 years old, but like a serving robot. But it gave him a close fight. Fritz, I mentioned, he's peaking at the right time, has had a lot of good wins, hard court success lately. Nori, as well, I think he's peaking at the right time. And Berrettini, we haven't seen enough, but like historically, I think he had a couple good losses. He lost to PCB and a close match against a very well playing Tiafoe in Washington. So I think he's someone in a 3 out of 5 set match. I would pick him over a Tiafoe or him over a PCB. Those players are my in my rankings. I think any of them could be a surprise winner of the U.S. Open.
It's hard to criticize that. That's a decent list. Again, it's mushy. Like I think you guys. But I'll tell you my 3, 4, 5. I still go. I have Alcaraz.
Do not. Okay.
I don't have FAA. I'm off the FAA train. But if I had to pick 3 other guys to win the U.S. Open, it would be Alcaraz, Tsitsipas, or Kyrgios. And I know you're a big Kyrgios guy, and the reason is there's a couple of reasons. I think he's been fairly consistent. I think his serve has been really on point. I think that I don't think he's afraid of anyone in the field. There's nobody he's intimidated by. The reason I have Alcaraz there is I think he has that ceiling level that he can get to where he could just go up a level and win a tournament. Especially we'll talk about the draw potentials. He could have an easy draw. The draw could break nicely for him. And I think Tsitsipas is out of respect. I think he has some adjustments. The on-court coaching helps him, which is funny. He was always getting coached on court, but now he can't actually get coached on court. The fact he sort of gave up in that Coric match, like I don't know if he was feeling it physically or what was going on. It has been really hot with climate change. I think it's hard for these guys in the summer to play on hard courts, but he's gonna have to do that in New York. He's never been past the 3rd round. But if I'm just thinking, like, I don't think the winner is going to come from this group. I think the winner is going to be Medvedev. But if I had to pick 3 other guys to win a Grand Slam right now on a hard court, those would be my 3 guys. Do you have the same 3, or what do you think is the next 3 in your mind?
Yeah, I actually have Kyrgios ahead of Alcaraz. I'm a little more biased towards him, but I have been super impressed with his summer and just his whole mindset this year. I think it shows a lot of growth and maturity at the right time. So I actually have him as number 3. If he wants to, he's going to downplay it. He's going to. It almost has to be like a draw that's challenging for him. I feel like when it's like for example, a guy like Hercox, like Kyrgios. That's a classic match that Kyrgios doesn't feel the crowd's into it. I almost feel like, and almost for him, it's boring. And I feel like the motivation is not really there. Whereas you put him up against a potential match with Medvedev in the quarters or wherever they're scheduled to meet, and I feel like that would give him the more of incentive to actually play up. He's a guy who loves to play up. You know? So I actually have him. If the draw is one that's challenging, I think he actually has a decent shot.
Interesting.
I have Alcaraz after that, just given his potential, and I say that with an asterisk there because I still feel like he needs maybe even up to 2 years of maturity. I don't know if he has that yet, especially with the shot making decisions I mentioned before. I don't know if he's ready for the buzz of New York yet, and the distractions, and just if he's able to own the opportunity. And then after that, I have Berrettini, just because he's a guy who we know when it comes to 3 out of 5 sets. I know he has not had a super impressive hardcourt summer or ability to perform or opportunities to perform, but when it comes to mindset and focus and intensity, he's a guy you really
Yeah.
cannot rule out, and he's done well here. So I have to throw him as my third person outside the top two.
So a couple of notes there. I was listening to Gil Gross and Nico Pereira. They were talking about Hercox, and Nico Pereira, he's a commentator he's a Mexican former tennis player and commentator for Tennis Channel. And you're saying Hercox, which is interesting because Hercox one of those guys you watch some matches and you're like, he's awesome. Like he's unplayable. He's got this big serve, big ground. He moves great. Other matches you watch him and there's nothing really impressive about him. And Hercox's struggle is when he plays guys who don't give him much. Right? He can't generate much pace on his own. But if he's playing guys where he can absorb the pace and kind of sit back, he's actually better off. And it's interesting because Kyrgios is that type of guy. Kyrgios isn't a patient grinder. So his point was when PCB was playing Hercox, PCB would have the edge in that match because PCB eventually would just go grind and grind and grind. He's a better Hercox, and Hercox can't come off the court. Kyrgios doesn't have the consistency, maybe mentally or physically, to just do that, which is record against Hercox is a little bit of a struggle, even though those are close matches. I think none of them were like runaway wins for Hercox. Let's talk about seeding because we talked about seeding. So again, we did this for Wimbledon, but if you're looking ahead, the way this breaks down, right? The most important dividing points are the top 2 versus 3 and 4, right? Because the top 2 can't be in the same half. The top 2 are going to be, assuming Djokovic is out, which he probably will be unless the rules change in 2 days. Medvedev and Nadal are going to be in opposite halves, and they're each going to draw either Alcaraz or Tsitsipas. That's why Stefanos getting to the final was so big, because it would have been rude otherwise, and it would have been a little bit unbalanced. But Tsitsipas, neither of those is an easy semi if those guys get there. Then the quarters, right? So who are your 4 quarters candidates to match up? Ruud, FAA, Norrie, Hercox. Based on form, I don't really see huge differences there. I mean, like if any of those guys get there, I would assume they're playing pretty well. I think FAA, Arjun's gonna laugh at my FAA. I think FAA is the most dangerous of those 4 if he gets to the quarters. I think he's got the highest potential. If he's playing well enough to get the quarters, he's the most dangerous. But I think they're all sort of equal. I don't think any of the top 4 are really scared of those 4 guys. But I think the interesting part is when you get to the other seeds, right? So when you start talking about, okay, so like who do they play in the 4th round? Those guys are playing Rublev, Fritz, Sinner, PCB. And you can make an argument that Rublev, Fritz, Sinner, PCB guys could beat Ruud, FAA, Norrie, or Hercox. So who knows who's going to make it out? But for the big guys, those top 4, Berrettini is in the next group. So Berrettini is a 4th round matchup for one of those 4 guys, right? So Berrettini to me is a really draw dependent guy because he could draw Nadal in the 4th round, and then that's not a great matchup for him. We've talked about that ad nauseum. But he could also be a big rock in the road for Medvedev in the 4th round. That's a pain in the butt match for Medvedev. And he could be a terrible match for someone like Tsitsipas on this surface, right? This is a low bouncing, fast surface that Berrettini loves because his serve travels well and ball stays low in his slice. And Tsitsipas hates low bouncing surfaces overall. So like my point is, that is to me, I looked at the seeds. That's the one I circled is Berrettini is in that next group where he is going to draw one of the top 4 guys in the 4th round. And he enough, unless he's hurt, he's going to be there. So one of those guys is going to have to beat him to get to the quarters. That to me is like my popcorn match, wherever he ends up. And then you get to the next section down, right? Now you're talking about the next 8 are 3rd round matches for the top 8. There really is, Kyrgios is the guy. Kyrgios is in that group. So you could have one of these guys. You could get Berrettini and Kyrgios playing each other in the 3rd and knocking each other out. And those are 2 of your 4, 5 contenders for the title right there. That's the funny thing about the seeding, right? Is like Kyrgios could get a great draw, or he could just be not drawn to play Berrettini in the 3rd. If he beats Berrettini, he has to play Medvedev, and all of a sudden it's a really terrible draw. And like you said, he may play up to that, but it's not optimal for his fitness. Tiafoe is also in that group. And then, but last 8. The last 8 draw the top 8. These are the guys that could see a Nadal, a Medvedev, someone in the round. And the guys I look like that are dangerous there, Coric is a third round match for one of the top 8 seeds. And Maxime Cressy is a third round match for a top 8 seed. And let me tell you something. If Tsitsipas is playing Cressy in the third round of the US Open, I'm not putting money on Tsitsipas or Cressy. I'm staying away from that match if I'm betting because I have no idea who's going to win that match. And then finally, we got the unseeded guys. There's a bunch of unseeded players. Everyone's going to look for Dominic Thiem and Andy Murray. And I think Davidovich Fokina, Isner. You mentioned Isner. No one wants to see Isner in the first round, but he could draw any of these guys in the first round. Korda, Drape, Pima. This is actually, to me, potentially a really interesting draw, Bilal, right? Because it's like, I would say that the most interested in seeing where they end up are Coric, Berrettini, and Kyrgios. Because I think any of those guys could theoretically, if they're playing well, be favored to win their quarter even.
Totally, yeah. And I think you're more scared that Maxime Cressy beat FAA at Wimbledon. I think that's why you're not giving that same bet to us.
He beat PCB in the first round last year at the U.S. Open.
Oh, that's true.
He took a set off of Medvedev this year. I mean, I think Cressy is a tough player to play. If you're not used to playing that style, he's got the crowd behind him. You're probably going to be playing on a smaller court, like the grandstand court. I would play him. The only guy in the top that I think would be fine playing him is probably Nadal.
Yeah,
I think Nadal wouldn't have that many problems with that. But Alcaraz plays Cressy in the third round. I don't know what to do with that. I'm like, okay, it's a dangerous match.
Yep.
In the draws, I have Cressy as one of my sleepers to maybe get a couple upsets through the tournament, maybe a Cinderella story to the quarters. And agree with Berrettini. I don't agree with FAA at all. I actually think FAA, his quarter is an open draw. Meaning,
sure. I agree.
Yeah, I think anyone who has him in that draw is straight shot to the quarters. Any one of those tops.
I'm not picking FAA to go to the quarters again. My point was, if those 4 guys are in the quarters, that means they're playing at enough level. Then I would think he's the most dangerous of Ruud, Norrie, and Hercox. FAA is the most dangerous, but I think I would actually say if I had to rank those 4 guys without even seeing a draw yet in terms of likelihood to make the quarters, I actually think Cam Norrie or Casper Ruud is a better bet just from a consistency standpoint. I think Norrie is actually the best bet.
Yeah, I was going to say Norrie's the one who
Norrie, I mean, you got to give some props.
Yeah.
Norrie. The guy his hand looks so funky, but he doesn't give you anything. He competes. He beat FAA in Los Cabos, I think. And then who did he just beat in he just took someone out.
Alcaraz.
He took out Alcaraz. And again, it was like mentally, he kept winning all the big points. Like I actually really like watching Cam Norrie at this point. I enjoy watching him play.
Yeah. I think the other guy I was going to say is who could potentially make it not far, but is somebody who's to watch out for is Tiafoe. I think actually I would actually favor out of the Americans Tiafoe more than Fritz, to be quite honest with you. I feel like he's kind of has he has that sort of that showmanship to him that he enjoys.
He likes the Open.
Yeah, he loves the Open, loves to be on the big nighttime show courts, and I feel like he's the kind of guy who.
Yeah. I think there's a difference.
Go ahead.
So I just think there's a bit difference between talent levels between him and Fritz. I think Fritz is
I don't think so.
Another level.
Maxed out. That's the thing. He's not that talented.
I don't think there's a huge difference. I think it's just different talent.
Different talent. Yeah, but I don't know.
I think Tiafoe. I mean, for me, Tiafoe's problem is not technical; it's mental.
But that's I think the problem with every one of these top 20 players is no one is mentally strong, and everyone just kind of like Tsitsipas in the finals, or Medvedev, #1 player in the world, down 2-3 and dumps 4 double faults because he hears firecrackers. Like how you can't even bet on him to win the finals. I feel.
So I mean, I know Medvedev. I think there's different levels of mental weakness and toughness.
Yeah.
Like I actually view taking Nadal out as an outlier here, right?
We should do a psychoanalysis episode of every player.
No, but we can do it right now. I mean, mentally, I look at all these seeds, right? Who do I view as mentally tough in the context of in the game?
Yeah.
I think of Casper Ruud as he's not a mentally weak player, right? I think Cam Norrie is a mentally tough player. Is actually fairly mentally tough. I don't think his problem is mental toughness. I think he's a pretty tough guy. I think PCB is pretty tough. I'm looking down the rest of the draw. Like
Coric is tough. I mean, Coric is like a rock.
Coric is mentally tough. I think Tommy Paul is pretty mental, right? We didn't even talk about Tom. Like, and I know they can all have weak moments. Everyone has moments when they're not good. Medvedev is for sure mentally tough overall. And I think Tsitsipas is overall pretty mentally tough. I think his problems are technical more than mental. Like we've talked about this offline, but I think Tsitsipas, his problem is his backhand and return to serve are weaknesses.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think they'll target anyone their go-to game against Tsitsipas is target his backhand.
The real question is, the real question, Arjun, is, and we've talked about this before, is how much are you mentally weak if your weaknesses show up on big points, right? We all have played tennis, right? We all have a stronger side. For me, it's my backhand, it's my weaker side. I'm much more likely to miss a backhand on a big point than a forehand because I don't trust it as much.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I compared to the rest of the field, I think Tsitsipas is more talented than an Alcaraz or Fritz or Norrie. Just overall.
Interesting.
Overall,
I don't agree.
I mean,
I don't agree.
He's making every semis, every finals.
But that's not talent. That's mentality. I personally view Alcaraz. I think Alcaraz is actually the most talented guy besides Nadal in the draw.
So more talented, or in terms of skill level, in terms of actually performing at this tournament?
I think in terms of pure talent. I'm not talking about him doing well in this tournament. I'm saying pure tennis talent. It's him or Kyrgios.
Yeah, I think potential-wise he's there. Just like I said, I think I know. Also, actually, I'm kind of curious to see how this encore coaching thing works for Alcaraz. Maybe that's actually maybe he's one of the guys who actually would benefit from that in terms of his ability to focus in and have Juan Carlos Ferrero actually guide him in the key moments, not do something stupid. Because my fear for him is to actually become like an FAA. That's how I could see him in the worst case situation. A guy who has all the ability but doesn't have the mind.
I don't think he's ever going to be that guy. I mean, the fact that he won the third set at Wimbledon and French Open down 2 sets tells me that's a guy who's not going to quit. I think he's mentally very tough. I think his problem is execution.
Who are we talking about right now?
Alcaraz, yeah.
Yeah.
Problem's execution. I don't think his problem is he's getting tight. I think the problem is he's almost too amped sometimes.
So I think that execution and amped level, that's also part of mentality. I think, so my thing, like just my history, like growing up playing tennis and seeing my brother play tennis and him like taking off sets off Hijikata in like small tournaments in college, or who was kind of for a few games neck and neck with Medvedev for like 5 games. It's not really about talent. I feel like it's about the decision making in the moment at a deuce point or at a 30 all, at a 40 love.
Yeah.
And who makes those points and who plays smarter.
But you're gonna do you view that as talent or mentality?
I think that's mentality. I think it comes down to who can flip the switch at the right time. And this past tournament, it was Coric. He was mentally tough this tournament, but is he going to be mentally tough in the finals of US Open? I don't know. I couldn't put money on that. And is Tsitsipas going to be mentally tough in a 5th set? I think he's going to just collapse like he's shown us a few times.
So for me, we've talked about this before. I don't view, for example, he gets to the French Open final 2 sets to love, and he doesn't win. He doesn't get to break point again in a match.
Yeah.
I don't view that as him choking. I just think that Djokovic figured out how to serve to him to where Tsitsipas couldn't do any damage on the return because the return of serve is not.
But then you see the body language of him in this match and like the previous matches, and it's like he gave up mentally, and that's where I think it was a huge mental battle.
Yeah. Well, we started this with Tiafoe and Fritz and went way off. So you said Fritz is more talented, and my argument would be I don't think Fritz is talented, right? Because I think Fritz is a cleaner striker off the ground, and he's got on paper a bigger serve. But I don't think he wins a ton of more free points on the serve compared to Tiafoe. And I think Tiafoe's a much better mover than Fritz is. And net, they're both pretty good with their hands. Tiafoe may be a little more creative. For me, their match recently where Tiafoe was up 4-love and blew it. I mean, his mentality is just mentally, I just don't trust him at this point. He doesn't trust himself. Like, he's had so many bad close losses. The Kyrgios match, we had 5 match points. The Fritz match up 4-love. He almost blew the Berrettini match. He should have won that match multiple times and couldn't close and finally won it. Like, I agree with Bilal. To me, he's the most. To me, I view him as the quote unquote the most talented from a pure ceiling standpoint. I can't imagine Fritz beating Medvedev at the U.S. Open, and Tiafoe probably wouldn't beat him either. But I could imagine Tiafoe troubling Medvedev more than Fritz at some point, because I think Fritz's problem at some point is just movement. He's just not a great move. I think if you get him moving around, especially diagonal movement, not so much side to side, I think you expose that. He just never looks that smooth.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen Tiafoe have a marquee tournament and go deep in any tournament.
I mean, he's been to the quarters of the Australian Open, lost to Nadal. He was in the 4th round of the U.S. Open last year, lost to FAA. I think those are his best results. You know, I don't think he has a whole stream of great ones, but Fritz only has 1 Grand Slam quarter, which was the last he was in. Maybe he proves us wrong, right? No, maybe he makes another deep run here, but I just wonder with Fritz, he's lucky, not lucky, he's earned it. He's not going to draw one of the big guys in the 4th round, right?
Yeah.
So in theory, he should be able to win get to a quarter. But I just worry that if he draws a Coric or a Kyrgios or one of these guys, he can't draw Coric, but he draws Kyrgios, for example, I'm never going to pick Fritz over Kyrgios in that match. I just can't. I could see him winning.
Didn't he just beat him?
Yeah, he can beat him. For sure he can beat him, but I'm not going to pick him in a Grand Slam match to pick Kyrgios at this point.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I wouldn't pick Tiafoe certainly over that, but I mean, Tiafoe actually hasn't won any tournament either. I just can't pick him to go deep either. Yeah. American tennis
is in trouble, guys.
American tennis.
But it's not even about going deep. It's more about who has potential to cause an upset, even if you think about it like that. It's more for me, it's like who can actually cause trouble to the top guys who we know are going to make it far.
This is up the draw.
So with Fritz, he's supposed at this point he's supposed to make these big wins and win. So it's not an upset if he wins and gets to the quarters right now. If Tiafoe does, if Tiafoe does, he's making some upsets.
Well, it's the FAA rule. We said it before Wimbledon. I was like, FAA needs to have 1 scalp before I trust. Doesn't have that scalp, and it now applies to Taylor Fritz as well.
Yeah,
I won't trust Taylor Fritz until he walks away with a big scalp, and he does not have a big scalp in a slam yet. He did not have one at Wimbledon, and he should have had Nadal and did not do it. So let's see if he can do it, right? I mean, so again, we're going to be looking at the draw really closely this upcoming Thursday. Look for where Nick Kyrgios ends. Look for where Tiafoe is. Look for where Coric is, and look for Maxime Cressy. And just for interest, I'm just curious where Isner, Korda, Draper. I think those guys are very dangerous. You could get Nadal, Isner in the 1st round. I don't think Nadal wants that match. You could get Draper, Medvedev in the 1st round. I don't think Medvedev wants that match. Yeah, so some interesting unseeded players lurking out there. We never quite get it that way. They always get like qualified, but never know. Could be interesting.
All right, guys.
Have a good night.
All righty.
All right, bye.